I found the tape at a yard sale in Nevada. It was labeled Tommy's First Birthday in faded marker, stuck in a box of old Nickelodeon merchandise. The seller looked pale when I picked it up, offering it for free just to get rid of it. I collect rare bootlegs, so I took it. I wish I hadn't. It wasn't a cartoon. It was raw footage. The parents thought it was a home video. They stopped watching after 43 seconds. What I saw on that static-filled screen wasn't animation. It was a distortion of reality that made me claw my own eyes out in terror. I've been archiving lost media for about 7 years now. It started as a hobby, digging through 4chan boards and obscure forums for lost pilots or alternate endings, but it eventually turned into a full-time obsession. There is a market for this stuff. Private collectors who pay top dollar for a VHS tape that shouldn't exist. That's how I ended up in a dusty garage just outside of Las Vegas. The heat was suffocating, a dry oven that baked the smell of old cardboard and gasoline into your clothes. The guy running the sale was named Miller. He was a jittery guy, skin tight against his skull, eyes darting around like he was expecting a raid. He had tables full of junk, rusted tools, stained clothes, and a box of VHS tapes near the back. I flipped through them. The Lion King, Aladdin, E.T., standard 90s trash. Then I saw it. It was a plain black cassette with a white label peeling off the spine. In handwritten blue ink, it just said, Rugrats, Pilot, Rejection. My heart skipped a beat. The Rugrats pilot is well known in the community, but a Rejection tape implies an earlier uncut version. I pulled it out. The plastic felt greasy, like it had been held by sweating hands for hours. I brought it to Miller. He didn't look at the tape. He looked at my hand, touching it, and he flinched. Take it, he croaked. His voice sounded like grinding gravel. Just take the damn thing. Get it off my property. I asked him how much. He laughed, a short manic bark that made the hair on my arms stand up. You don't pay for that, he said. You inherit it. Just go, before I change my mind and burn it. I didn't argue. I threw it in my bag and walked back to my car, feeling the heavy gaze of the man burning into my back until I turned the corner. I drove home with the AC blasting, trying to shake the weird vibe. I told myself he was just some meth head trying to clear space. I was wrong. My setup at home is professional. I have a stack of VCRs, upscalers, and a capture card connected to my PC to digitize everything immediately. I slot the tape into my primary old Sony deck. The machine whirred, the mechanical K-chunk of the tape loading sounding louder than usual in my quiet apartment. I hit play. The screen was blue for a long time. Just pure, deep, dark blue static. No tracking lines, no audio hiss, just silence. I checked the connections, thinking the tape was a dud. Then abruptly, the image cut in. It wasn't the familiar Klasky Kusupo logo. It was a camera shot. A handheld camera, shaky and out of focus, pointed at a crib. The room was dark, lit only by a street light, filtering through blinds. The date stamp in the corner read, October 14th, 1989. The camera movement was jerky, the operator breathing heavy behind the microphone. It sounded like a man, wheezing slightly, perhaps a smoker with a chest cold. He moved closer to the crib. The bars were painted a chipping pastel blue, the paint flaking off in large leaden scabs. There were toys scattered on the floor, but they weren't the bright, soft shapes familiar to anyone who grew up in the 90s. They were sharp, rusted metal objects. A screwdriver, A jagged piece of sheet metal, a coil of barbed wire, things a baby shouldn't have. The room smelled through the screen. It looked damp, the wallpaper peeling in long yellow strips that hung like dead skin. The camera focused. Inside the crib was a child. But it wasn't a cartoon. It was a real human infant, maybe 6 months old. He was bald, wearing a blue t-shirt that looked filthy, stained with something dark around the collar. The baby wasn't moving. He was staring up at the ceiling, eyes wide, unblinking. The camera zoomed in, the lens motor buzzing loudly. The resolution on the tape was grainy, standard VHS fuzz, but I could make out details that made my stomach churn. The baby's head was misshapen, lumpy, as if the skull hadn't fused right or had been compressed, and he was incredibly pale, the color of wet dough. Then the audio changed. The wheezing behind the camera stopped, replaced by a high-pitched, electronic whine. It wasn't feedback. It sounded like a dog whistle, amplified 1,000 times. I instinctively reached for the volume knob to turn it down, but the sound didn't drop. It felt like it was bypassing the speakers and vibrating directly in my jawbones. On screen, the baby reacted. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just opened his mouth. His mouth kept opening, unhinging. It went wider than a human jaw should go. It looked like a snake preparing to swallow an egg. The camera operator giggled. It was a wet, throaty sound. "Say hello to the nice people, Tommy," the voice whispered. It sounded like the voice actor from the show, but distorted, pitched down, sluggish. The baby, this thing, started to make a noise. It wasn't a gurgle. It was static. The same blue screen silence I heard earlier was coming out of the child's throat. I paused the video. I sat back in my chair, my heart hammering against my ribs. I've seen gore videos. I've seen bootleg snuff films. This was different. This felt wrong on a fundamental level, like I was watching something that violated the laws of biology. I walked to the kitchen and poured a glass of water. My hands were shaking so bad, I spilled half of it. I checked the time. It was 2 a.m. I had only watched 43 seconds. I went back to the desk. I told myself to stop, but I hit play. The camera panned left. The pan revealed that the room wasn't a bedroom. It was a basement. The walls changed from peeling wallpaper to cinder block, stained with water damage that looked like black veins pulsing in the low light. In the corner, huddled under a workbench, was another child. He was older, maybe 2. He was rocking back and forth, clutching a ragged piece of cloth that looked like a decomposed teddy bear. He was wearing thick black-rimmed glasses, but the glass was cracked, spider-webbed over his left eye. He was shivering violently. The camera operator moved closer, the heavy breathing returning, louder now, almost excited. "Chucky," the voice cooed. "Chucky, don't be scared. We're just playing." The child looked up. The fear in his face wasn't acting. It was the primal animalistic terror of prey, cornered by a predator. His face was covered in red sores, like he had been scratching at his own skin for days. "No," the child whispered. It was barely audible, but the audio capture on this tape was unnaturally crisp. "No play, dark." The operator laughed again, and this time a hand entered the frame. It wasn't a human hand. It was a glove, perhaps, or a prosthetic. It was purple, made of a strange, rubbery material, with long, tapering fingers. It looked like the hand of a cartoon character brought into the real world, but the texture was fleshy, porous. The hand reached out and poked the child in the forehead. The boy screamed. It was a sound that made my speakers rattle. I lowered the volume, but the scream seemed to pierce through the audio dampening. It was a scream of absolute agony. The camera jerked back, as if the operator was startled, and for a split second, the lens caught a reflection in a dusty mirror leaning against the wall. I paused the frame immediately. I use a high-end monitor for my work, allowing me to see details lost on a standard TV. I leaned in, squinting at the paused image. The reflection was blurry, distorted by the grime, but I could make out the shape of the cameraman. It wasn't a man. It was a suit. A large, cumbersome mascot suit. Purple scales, green spots. It looked like Reptar, the dinosaur, but it was filthy. The fabric matted with grime. And where the face mesh should be, where the actor inside would see out, there was nothing but darkness. No eyes, no human face, just a hollow black void inside the dinosaur's mouth. I felt a cold sweat break out on my neck. Someone was wearing a rotting mascot costume in a basement, filming abused children. This wasn't supernatural. This was a crime scene. I reached for my phone to call the police, but then the video started playing on its own. I hadn't touched the keyboard. The pause icon vanished. The tape kept rolling. The camera swung back to the corner. The boy was gone. Drag marks in the dust led toward a dark square hole in the concrete foundation. Just enough for me to see the wet, glistening texture of the girl's eyes. It was like high definition bleeding through an analog signal, a hyper-reality that shouldn't have been possible on magnetic tape. I couldn't look away. The camera operator, this person trapped inside the sweating, rotting Reptar suit, shuffled past the table. The sound of the oversized foam feet dragging on the linoleum set my teeth on edge. A dry sh-clomp that echoed in the small space. He approached the door behind the fridge. It wasn't a normal door. It was a heavy steel slab, like a meat locker entrance, secured with a rusted padlock that hung open. The operator pulled the handle. The hinges screamed, a sound so piercing that the audio levels on my capture software redlined and stayed there. Inside, the room was cold. I could tell it was freezing because the camera lens instantly fogged up around the edges, obscuring the view with a halo of condensation. The room was lined with metal shelves, and on the shelves were jars, hundreds of them. Inside the jars were things suspended in cloudy amber liquid. I squinted, trying to process the shapes. They looked like tongues, eyes, fingers, spare parts. In the center of the room was a wheelchair. Sitting in it was a figure that made the other horrors on the tape look like child's play. It was an old man, or at least the skin was old. It hung off his bones in loose gray drapes, spotted with liver cancer marks. He was wearing a striped shirt, familiar from the show as the grandfather character, but the fabric was fused to his chest, engaging with the scar tissue as if he had been wearing it for decades. "Grandpa," the camera operator whispered. The voice was trembling with pure, unadulterated grief. "It's time for pudding." The figure in the wheelchair didn't move. His head was lolled back, mouth agape, staring at a flickering television set in the corner that was playing nothing but static. The Reptar hand reached into a pouch on the suit's stomach, the pouch where a kangaroo would keep its young, and pulled out a handful of something wet and black. It looked like soil mixed with ground glass and beetles. The hand approached the old man's mouth. I gagged. I physically retched, covering my mouth with my hand, but my eyes were glued to the screen. The operator shoved the filth into the open, slack jaw, and then the old man swallowed. The sound was audible. Gulp, gulp. The throat muscles worked mechanically, like a snake digesting a rat. Then slowly, the old man's head turned. He wasn't looking at the Reptar suit. He wasn't looking at the girl in the kitchen. He looked directly into the lens, directly at me. His eyes were missing. The sockets were sewn shut with thick black twine in the shape of X's. But he saw me. He smiled, revealing gums that were studded with rusty iron nails instead of teeth. "Stu?" he rasped. The voice didn't sound like it was coming from the speakers. It sounded like it was coming from the hallway behind me. "Turn off the lights, Stu. I can see you breathing." I froze. The name Stu echoed in my apartment, bouncing off the walls of my living room, not the speakers. I spun around in my chair, grabbing the heavy brass lamp from my desk, holding it like a club. The hallway was dark. The door to the bedroom was slightly ajar, just how I left it. But the air had changed. It smelled like the basement in the video. Damp earth, rotting fabric, and old ammonia. My heart was beating so hard it hurt my chest. I looked back at the screen. The video hadn't stopped. The old man in the wheelchair, the thing pretending to be Grandpa Lou, was laughing now. A dry, hacking sound that matched the thumping of my own pulse. The camera operator began to back away, the heavy Reptar feet scuffling on the concrete. The operator was hyperventilating. "Please," the voice inside the suit begged. "Please, I did it. I fed him. Let me go." The girl, the one with the milky eyes, stepped into the frame. She was holding the screwdriver I had seen in the crib earlier. She looked at the camera, then at the suit. "Reptar doesn't leave," she said calmly. "Reptar is home." She lunged. The camera fell. It hit the floor with a deafening crack, the lens facing sideways. The footage tilted, showing the underside of the metal shelves and the linoleum floor. I watched, paralyzed, as the purple feet kicked and thrashed. I heard the wet, tearing sound of fabric being ripped. Then the screaming started. It wasn't the scream of a man. It was the scream of something losing its soul. A high, thin wail that merged with the electronic whine from earlier. Blood began to pool on the floor, creeping into the frame. But it wasn't red. It was black. Thick, viscous oil that moved with a life of its own. I scrambled under my desk to rip the power cord out of the wall. My fingers found the plug, and I yanked it with all my strength. The monitor went black. The computer tower powered down with a dying whir. The room plunged into silence. I sat there on the floor, breathing hard, clutching the plug in my sweating hand. It was over. I had killed the connection. Then the monitor flickered. A green phosphor light, weak and pulsing, bloomed in the center of the dead screen. It wasn't powered on. It was unplugged. But the image formed anyway. It wasn't the basement anymore. It was a shot of a door. A white, wooden door with a brass handle. I stared at it, my brain refusing to process the information. It was my door, the door to the room I was currently sitting in. The camera was outside, in the hallway. I watched on the unplugged screen as a purple, three-fingered hand reached into the frame. It grasped the handle of my door. On the screen, the handle turned. In my room, 5 feet away from me, the real handle turned. Click. The latch slid back. The door creaked open, just an inch. I didn't scream. I couldn't. The fear was a heavy physical weight, pinning my limbs to the carpet. The door drifted open until the handle hit the wall with a soft thud. Standing in the darkness of my hallway was the suit. It looked even worse in 3 dimensions. The purple scales were molting, dripping a thick tar-like substance onto my hardwood floor. The smell was overpowering, a mix of ozone, like a blown fuse, and the copper tang of a slaughterhouse. It had to stoop to fit through the frame. The giant, lifeless foam head tilted sideways, the empty mouth gaping like a black wound. It didn't rush. It shuffled, clomp, clomp, the same sound from the video. It stepped into the pale light of the street lamp, filtering through my window. I saw the stains on the chest, dried, brown maps of old violence. I saw the hands, the rubber cracking, revealing gray, dead skin underneath. It stopped 3 feet from me. I could hear the breathing inside, the wet, rattling breath of the man, Stu, who had been filming. Or maybe it wasn't him anymore. The monitor behind me, still unplugged, flared with static white noise, illuminating the room in a strobe light flicker. In the flashes, I saw the suit change. One moment it was foam and fabric, the next it was wet scales and pulsating meat. It reached out. I tried to scramble back, my heels digging into the rug, but my back hit the desk. I was trapped. The hand touched my face. It wasn't rubber, it was cold, slimy wetness. "You watched," a voice said. It didn't come from the suit. It came from the tape sitting on the desk. "You watched the whole thing." The suit's other hand reached down and picked up the cassette. It crushed the plastic shell effortlessly, the black magnetic ribbon spilling out like guts. "Now you know the rules," the voice whispered, sounding like the girl with the milky eyes. "The camera has to keep rolling. Someone has to hold it." The suit unzipped, a sound like tearing meat. The darkness inside the suit spilled out, expanding, swallowing the room. I felt myself being pulled forward, not by hands, but by suction. I was being pulled into the suit. I tried to fight, but my body felt light, insubstantial, like I was turning into static. The last thing I saw was my own living room, distorted and grainy, viewed through the mesh of a dinosaur's mouth. I tried to scream, but the only sound that came out was the high-pitched electronic whine of a recording starting. A red light blinked in the corner of my vision. Wreck. The girl was standing in front of me, holding the screwdriver. She smiled. "Action," she said,